everyone. My name is Natalie Yeadon. I'm the CEO and co-founder with Impetus Digital. At Impetus Digital, we have built some of the best-in-class asynchronous and synchronous virtual collaboration and communication tools. We have worked with life science companies from across the globe over the past 14 years to help them with everything from virtual insight gathering through advisory boards to online medical education and virtual education, to doing things like online and virtual peer influence programs like journal clubs and ambassador programs at conferences. But more importantly at Impetus, we really believe that everything starts with the conversation. And from these big, hairy, audacious conversations with some of the leading edge thinkers, some of the digital provocateurs, and some of the healthcare thought leaders, is we can all work together to collectively and positively disrupt healthcare. So I'm very excited to having one of these healthcare thought leaders with me at the table today. This is actually Rick Anderson. Rick is actually the president and general manager of North America of a digital therapeutics company called DarioHealth. DarioHealth offers the most comprehensive chronic condition management solution in this space. And it's covering everything from diabetes to hypertension to weight management, musculoskeletal systems and health, and behavioral health within one integrated technology platform. So prior to his role, he has served as the president and COO of Impetus Incorporated, and he has also held multiple other senior leadership positions, including the chief financial officer across many different industries. So welcome, Rick. So happy to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Natalie. Thanks for having me.
So really exciting company. And of course, you're leading the charge at DarioHealth. I was wondering if you could just give us a brief overview of your career trajectory and how you landed in the position that you're in today.
Well, so it's been a little bit of a tortured path, but I started my career actually in public accounting, primarily in the entertainment industry. But then over a period of time, actually got involved in mergers and acquisitions, including back when I was working for Price Waterhouse, they had an investment bank, and that took me into a bunch of different industries, everything from sneakers to Mexican food. Obviously still did entertainment, but also that's where I did the first few healthcare deals that I got involved with. And then from there, actually, I left there when the internet was first going crazy and started working as a CFO in a variety of different organizations, landed in an incubator, ultimately became the CFO of a healthcare tech company. And then from there, moved into a company that had an interest in, really sort of looking at areas in health plans, employers, things of that nature for their technology. And we ended up pivoting that company, which is what became Impetus that you mentioned a minute ago. And we took that company from an idea primarily on a piece of paper all the way up through having contracts with most of the major health plans, several of the regional plans, some very large employers as part of the process. So, that really set up, that was a model that was based on coaching and really focused on chronic conditions through the lens of behavioral health. So really focused on getting people the behavioral health care that they needed and understanding that would be able to improve clinical outcomes and lower costs for people. And one of the things that was interesting in that process was we did a lot of data science work around understanding members and what worked for them in a behavioral health context, and how to work with them. But the challenge, of course, with a lot of those personalized insights is you can't do it in a human model. So I always had interest in, the digital model and the chronic condition model. And so when I first talked to DarioHealth and they had the pieces in place in terms of what was, a nice solution for health plans and employers that were looking to help members manage their chronic conditions like diabetes and hypertension, it seemed like a natural fit for the things that I had done in the past. So moved to DarioHealth in January of 2020, just a couple months before, the world kind of changed a little bit.
We talk about coincidental timing, I guess there, Rick, but obviously, you were involved in the digital and digital health for a long time before COVID turned everything upside down. Certainly, we understand that it's majorly accelerated the adoption of technology. Maybe we can talk a little bit about what DarioHealth does specifically, and if there was any sort of jumping off point that happened when the pandemic occurred.
Yeah, so I mean, right now, what Dario and we built this really over the last couple of years, including during the pandemic. But DarioHealth is focused on having one integrated multi-chronic condition platform for members to be able to help them manage their chronic conditions, change their behavior over a period of time, and therefore improve the clinical results that we see with those members. And if you think about what it takes to help manage these conditions, I think this is where digital health in general and Dario specifically has an advantage, because digital health is what happens between provider visits. So, really, I'd like to distinguish between telehealth, which is an analog for, face-to-face brick and mortar kinds of visits, and digital health, which is, happens all of the time. We can do asynchronous and synchronous communication, kind of like what we're doing now. We can, provide support, and we can customize and personalize that support, throughout the process. And that's, I think, the other piece of what we're doing that is, really resonating. I think it's two pieces. One is that we have a fully integrated platform. So one coach, one one journey for the members. It really moves and responds to what they're interested in doing. So the chronic conditions that we manage on the platform right now are diabetes, prediabetes, hypertension, musculoskeletal. So think about like digital physical therapy and behavioral health. And, one of the things all of those things have in common is that behaviors drive the clinical outcomes for that. So how you respond to it, how you manage your disease. And we run an AI engine underneath what we're doing to make personalized recommendations to members that changes dynamically over a period of time, so that we can engage them and provide them value at each step of the process of doing that. Most of the digital health companies that are out there are using kind of what I would call modules, which is, hey, if you've got diabetes, you use this piece. If you've got hypertension, you use this piece, but it's not a continuous journey. And what the data will tell you is that when you give people two tools to manage two conditions that they have, because there's high levels of comorbidity between these conditions, is they don't use one or the other, they use neither. So, the advantage to having that on one integrated platform that's personalized, that responds to you, is what we're seeing is getting traction, both from the customer perspective as well as from the member perspective.
Fantastic, and sounds like a really integrated concept. Now, I do have to ask the question. I mean, we're in a very busy world where there's a lot of players in this digital health, behavioral science space. Tell us a little bit about the business model for DarioHealth. Who is kind of the client avatar, and how does the money flow? Like, how did you build the business, and what is it? Is it a B2C or a B2B?
So Dario started as a B2C company years ago. And, the advantage to being a B2C company, which is still part of our DNA, is it really allows you to build a product with the focus on the person who's actually using it. So whether you call that a patient or a member, it allows you to develop that information. It allows you to develop data quickly. So, we were generating more than 5 billion data points a year based on the B2C platform, which then can inform your underlying AI engine around what are the right things to do at the right time. How do people respond? You can learn their daily routines, which helps you provide value. In 2020, we pivoted the company. We still have our B2C business, and we'll continue to have our B2C business. We're excited about that. We can use it for a lot of different things. And the members that are on that platform really like it. But we also then added B2B. So we're selling to health plans and self-insured employers primarily at this point. And that really provides bigger groups of people that are eligible, that can enroll in the process, and then it's paid for by the health plan or the employer. So the member does not have out-of-pocket costs associated with that. So it's a little bit of a different model from that perspective, but the B2C DNA that's in our background really still helps us keep the product that was built by those members. I mean, because it was built by what they responded to at the center of that.
Really interesting that you have a combination model, because a lot of people don't. So let's actually just isolate the B2C. So the baseline that you're actually marketing and selling directly to a consumer like myself. So let's just say theoretically, I have diabetes and I'm kind of going through my day and I use my typical social media outlets and Instagram or whatever. How am I going to find out about DarioHealth, and what is my customer journey like about finding it and then on-ramping onto the platform?
So we, from a consumer point of view, direct to consumer point of view, we use many of the same tools that anybody does on the internet in terms of creating interest. So, we're utilizing social media, we're using, Google AdWords, we're trying to be in the search in the right places when they're looking for that, serving up ads, use Facebook, Instagram, et cetera, to generate awareness and also drive traffic through. And then people can either, purchase the service through, folks like Amazon or directly from us on our website.
And what is my experience like? So I have diabetes. What is my on-ramping process? What am I getting from the program?
Right. So when somebody comes on board, there's some short questionnaires in terms of understanding where you are in your journey. How long have you had diabetes, for example, because somebody who's had it for 10 years is going to be in a different place than somebody who was, diagnosed with it last month. So, you'll have different needs associated with that. You'll receive a blood glucose monitor from us if it's diabetes. That'll come in the mail. Once that gets received, then you'll receive a phone call from our coaches, which will, assist you with setting up what you're doing, help you explore the app, understand what it is that's motivate you. All of that really goes into the program and help you do your first measure from that perspective. One of the things that's really interesting about our blood glucose monitor is that it doesn't have a battery, it doesn't have a screen. It actually has a little piece that plugs directly into the bottom of your phone, whether you've got an Android or an iPhone. And what that does is that when you take a measure, it's real time and that gets transmitted to the cloud, which enables us to do real-time digital or human coaching based on what that reading is, or serve up content that would be meaningful and useful to you based on that. So it really increases the engagement that you see with those members. And then as you go forward over a period of time, what you'll see is, depending on how you're responding to it, what you're doing on the application. So, if you're looking for recipes because your HbA1c is higher than you would like, then you will tend to get recipes and tips associated with that over a period of time. If really you're earlier in your journey, let's say, and education's more important, then you'll get more content associated with those kinds of activities. And it's really based on what you respond to. So if you respond more to the educational materials, you'll get more of that. For example, I'm overly simplifying it. Our data scientists would probably be unhappy with me, but and if you've got a more of an interest in terms of you're responding differently to recipes or motivational types of content, et cetera, then you'll tend to get more of that. But the system will continue to sample for what else you do respond to. And then you always have access to two levels of coaches. One is what you might want to think about as an educated health friend. Somebody who understands the condition you're going through, but is there primarily for motivation and support, and help you stay engaged with the platform. And then we also have what we would call expert coaches, which are really like certified diabetes educators, nurses, et cetera, who also do coaching, but they're primarily there for educational purposes, and we utilize those where that would make the most sense.
Obviously, as a consumer of this and somebody who has a condition, or theoretically, if I had diabetes as an example, my inclination is I'd want to get my caregivers and or my healthcare providers involved somehow. Tell us a little bit, is there a social component to this, a platform? Is there interoperability with electronic health records? How does the healthcare ecosystem get involved with my specific data?
Yeah, so Dario was built on the idea of being open by design. And what that really means is we can intake data, which is really more, happens on the B2B side, and we can actually export data fairly easily. So we have multiple different ways, for example, that you can share your data with your provider. And, all of that depends on what your relationship is with your provider and how your provider works. But, you can push a button and email it to them. You can print it out. You can send it to them via text. In some cases, we do have integrations with electronic health records. So depending on, who your provider is, we can, push that information, or that information with our, with authorization from the consumer, we can push that information into their health record. Like I said, depending on what they're doing. So we try and provide all of that. One of the things that I think to keep in mind, there's lots of discussion about how do we get providers involved and how do we share information with them. And, I think this goes back to something I said earlier, which is, if you have diabetes, you probably are seeing your physician once every few months, once a quarter, something along those kinds of lines. The challenge with that, of course, is your disease is what happens between those visits. But when you see that provider, you see them, I think the average these days is for something like 12 minutes, of which 6 minutes of is the doctor actually talking to you. So how much of that data that's in there that you push to them are they really going to be able to look at? It really helps if you have that data and they can look at it real time and they can see it over a period of time, not just, hey, you went to the lab and you measured it and I've got a point in time reference. They can look at it because, especially with diabetes, things like time and range matter a lot more than an individual point in time. And the other thing that we try and enable patients to do is how to talk to their doctors about where they are and where they are with their journey so that their doctor can give them that input. And we found that to be the most effective approach.
Yeah, you release some really good points about the practicality of pushing data to an electronic health record and how much and when is that physician actually going to look at it. It's when you're in front of them. So it's a really, really good point. But as somebody who might be a biohacker or really involved and really proactive, which is often probably times the avatar, if you will, of the individual who's proactively purchasing your kind of product, is the question comes down to is, I've probably got an Apple Watch or some other fitness trackers or a myriad of them. And I guess ultimately the question is, how do you answer that question where people inevitably are going to say, I have all that data, or I've got this dashboard or this data. What is really differentiating about what I'm using with DarioHealth as a consumer? And why do I want to use this, and what's really different about it than all these other trackers that I might be using?
Well, I think there's a couple of things there. One is that trackers are trackers. So, I have an Apple Watch. It'll tell me what my heart rate was, what my number of steps were, what my oxygen level was, all of those kinds of things in a silo. But it's up, I go and I look at them and, okay, so I know what the reading is. Maybe I'm more informed and I understand what that reading means relative to other things. Maybe I don't. But okay, so now I have a reading. There's nothing there behind it. And I think that, things like Dario, where we're really looking at taking that data and using that data to help people, help them stay motivated, help them to know what the next best step is, recommend some activities, help them improve those ratings or those readings, if that's what they're looking to do, or in some cases maintain right where they are. How do I make sure that I keep my blood glucose or my hypertension under control? And how do I do that? What does this mean in a bigger context? And how do I improve? And that's where I think platforms and things like what Dario is doing, that's able to serve up information based on the way that you're using it, how you're responding, and what your readings are, which direction they're trending. That's a lot more useful than just a number. A number is a number, right? I think that, if you take a step back too, and you say, well, what's an individual number in context? Let's, most people have diabetes, the vast majority also have hypertension. There's all kinds of data now that shows that diabetes causes MSK issues, musculoskeletal issues. Behavioral health is very common in chronic diseases, right? So all of these things together, when you look at the comorbidities, okay, if I've got readings from a Fitbit and I've got readings from my blood pressure monitor, I've got readings from, none of those things are integrated together. And the reality is that, individuals are more than the sum of their conditions. So if you just take condition plus condition plus condition and tracker, you don't really actually get to how do those things interact? Where is where do I need to focus? How do I navigate through that? And I think that systems like Dario's that can do that. And I think, Dario is somewhat unique in terms of the level of integration that we're seeing in the platform. I think that really helps people to manage their conditions in the long term versus just have some data that's out there swirling around.
So it really makes a really interesting concept, Rick, is like you're saying, the comorbidity, which is absolutely very true. I guess the question comes down to is there some machine learning or some algorithms or something built into the software that really gives an N=1, a very personalized, precise discussion about what your health is and getting those parameters straightened. So it's not, like you said, it's just a very linear solution for each of the different comorbidities that may exist with you as a consumer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that yes is the answer to the question. And we call it dynamic personalization. And that's really about the idea that, there's a lot of companies out there that'll say, even if they give you a member journey, they'll say, you look like all the people in group A, and therefore you're going to get the group A member journey. We will do that up front and say, you look like group A, you're going to start in the group A position, but then the system looks at how you respond to it. So there's no two journeys that are exactly the same, because it's all about how you respond to that system. And that's how you personalize it to the level that you get engagement. I mean, we've got, approximately 80% engagement still at a year after somebody gets involved in it. That's very high engagement. And I think that speaks to the fact that we're providing that information to people in a way that is useful to them, so they come back, and over a period of time, you're trying to create, habits associated with that. And, obviously motivation up front matters in some of those things, but, we really look to the things of, how do we keep people engaged that, otherwise might find a reason to stop engaging. And, that's what, also goes back to the integrated platform. I hurt my back. Now I don't want to focus on diabetes, but we can help you with that through the MSK solution, and then come back to the diabetes. Because if you just tell somebody measure when their back is hurting, they're just going to turn you off.
Absolutely. So really interesting about the level of engagement rates, and certainly engagement rates probably translates into other KPIs and metrics associated with wellness and what have you. So how do you translate those measurements to things like payers and providers and things like that? Like, what's in it for them, and why is that important?
Yeah, so it depends on whether we're talking about self-insured employers or health plans. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, what our end customers, the folks that are paying for the service, want for their members and employees is a good experience, give them the ability to help manage their conditions, which will yield better clinical outcomes. And better clinical outcomes have been demonstrated over and over again to translate to lower, costs associated with that. Also, better outcomes translate to better presenteeism, less absenteeism, right? So improvements across the board, better focus on what they're doing, right? So if your conditions are managed, if you're happy and comfortable with that, you can engage more in your day-to-day life, which is everything from playing with the grandkids to what you're doing at work. And that's really what they're looking for is those improvements, that member experience, better clinical outcomes, and the lowering of costs. And at Dario now we have over 30 studies demonstrating clinically what the impact that the platform has. And we're excited about the last couple, especially that we've had come out. We've got great results in hypertension, great results in diabetes on a standalone basis. And now what we've been doing is studies around what happens when you treat these conditions together. So going back to the platform, right? So, and what we're seeing is things like, hey, when you manage them together, you get better outcomes in both than if you manage them individually. And, maybe that's somewhat intuitive, but, to really see it in a study is powerful. And that's a lot of what we're showing, the buyers is that, here's the data that supports what we're doing. And I think that's one of the things that's really important about digital health as we go forward and we look at broader based adoption of that, especially outside of the direct to consumer, is can you prove that what you're doing on the platform is having an impact?
100%. Now, going back to the pandemic, and certainly this is when you sort of first joined the company, and then there's been a catapulting of things going on. Now, one of the things that they really noticed is the impact on a lot of people's mental health. Now, I know that Dario also focuses on behavioral health, especially around stress, anxiety, depression. Tell us a little bit about how your programs and platform have seen an uptake. What has been happening? Is there age groups? What have you been able to intervene in this area? Really, quite frankly, a lot of issues, including suicides. What have your coaches been seeing and hearing through the platform?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, there's obviously this is sort of waxed and waned to some extent as we move through the pandemic and what we've all experienced, right, as part of this. And, if you have a chronic condition, especially something like diabetes, hypertension, you saw, significant increases in anxiety and stress during the pandemic, both because there were higher risk factors, associated with the coronavirus, as well as the isolation factors that we saw. So, strong demand around connectivity, loneliness, stress, and anxiety. Also really, I think what we've seen over a period of time is that that's, not resolved, but it has come down to some extent for some of those pieces, but you still see a lot of anxiety associated with how do I manage a chronic disease, and going back to where are you in the process, right? So, you may have it well under control and therefore your anxiety might be lower. Your depression may be not, or, there may not be depression there. But what's key is really continuing to look for those symptoms, because they will wax and wane, both, not only during the pandemic, where I think what we had was higher amplitudes of those. We continue to see strong demand for behavioral health, across the spectrum. Some of that's still related to the pandemic. Some of that's related to, even over the last 5, 6, 7 years, we've seen a greater and greater appreciation for the impact of behavioral health on chronic conditions. And I think that we've removed a lot of the stigma. There's still a lot of work to be done there. But as you do that, you start, and if you can sample on a platform like what we do, you can look for those. And then sometimes it's as simple as steering somebody to, a computer-based, help module, an electronic CBT module, or, sometimes it's having them have a conversation with a coach. Or in our case for behavioral health, especially with our health plan and employer partners, we'll refer somebody out to, whether it be a telehealth visit or a brick and mortar visit associated with that if they're a higher acuity. And it's really trying to understand, how do you identify that earlier? How do you understand that it's episodic, depending on where you are, and that having that level of support always there can help from having those become bigger and bigger issues associated with that over a period of time. So, I think amplitude during the pandemic, but I think that, that those issues will continue to be there, and there will continue to be a focus.
Yeah, beautiful. Really, really nice to see that. Post-pandemic, as we look at this, the world has also just kind of been clawing its way into finding some sort of normalcy, and including part of this has been this whole reset. We heard about the Great Resignation and labor shortages. Obviously we're going through all kinds of other economic and geopolitical instability right now as well too. But one of the questions comes down to is employers looking for perks and various other things to include in their, employee package or recognition programs. I was curious about, has Dario seen an uptake because of these issues around the Great Resignations and people looking for ways of attracting talent? Where does that fit in for Dario?
Yeah, so I think, like you said, there's a couple of forces that are, in some cases even working against each other. But yes, I mean, there's definitely been an interest from employers in terms of, how do I attract, retain, and give benefits to and keep my employees happy? So there's definitely, I think behavioral health services is a component of that. I think, the other things that Dario provides is a component of that. With the, depending on who you talk to, the recession looming or in, what does that mean, going forward? And I think that, that's one of the places where, folks also then focus on, how do I control costs associated with that? One of the largest costs for employers is really around, and health plans for that matter, is chronic conditions and chronic condition management. So how can I better do that? So I think that we benefit from both of those, the fact that people are trying to retain their employees, give them a good employee experience, et cetera, and at the same time, reduce the costs associated with it.
At the same time, there's been a lot of discussion, and many, many employers and organizations are really focused on some of the underrepresented, the underprivileged, some of the individuals who, may be still working remotely or, and not really seen or as often. I was just curious about where Dario is on the whole spectrum of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what are some of the programs and some of the thinking that you are considering incorporating in the platform for that purpose?
Yeah, I mean, so from an organizational perspective, I think diversity is important to us because it helps us understand our underlying members that are there. So, we look to create teams that are diverse from that perspective. But looking at really the member experience, I mean, one of the things that I think is exciting about what Dario can do, because it really has that impact, is it's that personalization. And personalization is about, many things, but one of those is cultural and people's experience associated with that. We've got, north of 250,000 people on the platform, and we're generating the data associated with that. If you look at it, we've got wide diversity in terms of location. I mean, the vast majority of our the folks on the platform are in the US, but we have people, globally that are on the platform. We also have people from a variety of different socioeconomic statuses, a variety of different ethnicities. So we have a lot of diversity in the data. And so what that enables us to do is really personalize based on a lot of these inputs associated with it, and make, for example, culturally sensitive recommendations as part of that, which may be food, it may be activity levels, et cetera. So that's really important, and we will look to continue to diversify and build out that information so that we can serve different populations. Right now, we're serving commercial populations, Medicare populations, or older. So if you look at, we have people as old as 85 on the platform. And then obviously younger people as well. So it really gives you lots of different information with which to work with, which we're very proud of, but we will also continue to push to get more and more diversity on the platform so that we have that information to help everybody.
So really interesting, Rick, that you have a very large and robust data center, almost like a data lake. I was curious about how you might be utilizing that data. I mean, obviously privacy and all of that stuff, I'm sure, is embedded in that and encrypted, but is there something else further that's happening, further analyses, things like population health discussions, other sorts of derivatives from that? What are you doing with the data lake?
Yeah, I mean, so primarily we use it to personalize members' experience. So, helping give that interactive experience that keeps them engaged on the platform, because if you can engage them and keep them on the platform, you can, see behavior change, incremental behavior change over a period of time, which translates to clinical outcomes. But we do look for insights in the data to understand, different kinds of things, both, for our customers to understand how like big picture trends are functioning. For example, what members generally speaking are going to respond to, because that helps inform product as well, in terms of, just like from our consumer background, it's a little bit of a different story these days. But, when consumers, you look at how they respond to different things on the platform, it allows you to, add new features that they find valuable, et cetera, take away things that don't, remove the clutter, things of that nature. But primarily we use it for member experience, product types of things, and occasionally we will look at it for big trends and insights associated with that.
Yeah, beautiful. Pharma companies are always looking for ways to participate and send out clinical trials, delivery and creation of new entities, chemical entities, software as a medical device, et cetera. Is there opportunities to connect, utilizing either your data or the tool for patient-reported outcomes? What's your thoughts on the utilization by pharma companies? And the other piece on that, the corollary to that, is a lot of times they will start implementing their own patient support programs. A series of touch points through a course of a disease where there's reminders and all of the kinds of things that DarioHealth does. So I'm curious, either on the clinical trial side or on the patient support program side, how pharmaceutical medical device companies might be able to collaborate with Dario.
So I think generally speaking, digital health provides a window that is not currently available to pharma companies that can be used a variety of different ways. We're not really involved at this point in clinical studies, but it's certainly something that could be used in that context associated with that to provide support. But really what it also does is provide insights. Right? How are people utilizing the medication? What are they doing above and beyond just the medication? Because medications are powerful, but there's lots of other factors that go into managing chronic diseases. As the world marches towards value-based care, the reality is it's almost impossible to do value-based care without digital health. So whether you're talking about pharmaceutical companies or device companies, over a period of time, being able to show what the impact of those members are having based on those devices or those pharmaceuticals really can be much better measured and give you much better insight when you have a one-to-one relationship with members, and you can look at trends over a period of time, look at different groups of people, how they respond. So, there's tons of data in there that can be utilized to improve the patient experience and improve outcomes, and ultimately to get us to value-based care, where you have payers are paying for the results that they're getting. And those can even be differentiated theoretically, at least, I'm not sure anybody will want to do this, but down to the individual level, right? But you can certainly do it to the group level. We have a relationship with Sanofi that we entered into at the beginning of the year. I think what's unique about that relationship is the fact that they're not focused on pairing our digital tools specifically with a medication. They were focused on digital health on an overall basis and really getting involved in that and understanding and interested in that. They were interested in testing some of their ideas on top of a proven behavior change platform, which we provided, so they can they don't have to rebuild the entire platform, and they can provide they can look at certain kinds of questions associated with that. So I think they really see the value in that, and that's unique. I haven't seen any other deals between digital health and pharma that were based on digital health on an overall basis, not specifically paired to individual drugs. And I look at that from the perspective of that's the holistic platform approach versus the, hey, I've got a specific drug and I want a digital interaction with that. Now I'm back in a silo. So, how much value, I mean, there's certainly value to be had there, but I think there's less value than there is when you're looking at it on a platform basis.
Yeah, really interesting and great point. This sounds like an amazing solution. So the question is, Rick, how come everybody's not using it? What is the barriers? Why people can't get their head around it?
Well, I think that you have some of the common barriers that you have in the, the medical industry. We really started our transition to B2B, which is, the vast majority of Americans here in the US get their benefits paid for by somebody else, or at least, supported by somebody else. So, it's a process of getting people to understand who Dario is and how we evolved. And, obviously we evolved during the pandemic. We did 3 acquisitions to, provide the integrated platform. So I think we're, very early in the game from that perspective in terms of making people aware of it. And we've already gotten very good traction, including with some very large partners, National Health Plan, Sanofi, which we've already talked about. I think that speaks to what we've been able to do. And I think that every day increases the awareness associated with that. There's always questions around, as you're rolling something out is, cost. And, I think that some of the other, elements that are out there are, what's the proof that this works? And I think we're early in the game. I mean, I mentioned, the number of studies that we have, but I think that, studies will continue to improve. And I think we're going to see a broader and broader separation of folks like, Dario from other less proven or less studied or less rigorously studied solutions that are out there. So, I think adoption takes a period of time in healthcare. I mean, the data out there is, after a solution is proven, traditionally it takes more than a decade to get doctors to use it, for example. So, here we're really taking the approach of going consumer, payer, and, physician based all at the same time. So, I think we're seeing a little faster acceleration, as you mentioned. The digital health world accelerated probably 15 years in 3 weeks because people had concerns and challenges and what does this mean and how does that work? But the overall structure around healthcare makes it challenging, to push anything forward. We're very pleased where we've gotten in the last couple of years, and I think we'll continue to see an acceleration of that.
Absolutely. Super exciting area. And honestly, Rick, we could probably speak for hours just getting into digital therapeutics in general and what the promise of the future. I mean, well, it'd be really interesting to maybe have you on the show a little later on and see where things are getting at too. But really exciting space. For anybody who's interested in connecting with Rick, partnerships, finding out more about what's going on, please look for his contact details in the show notes below. If you're also interested, please check out impetusdigital.com. These are the kinds of conversations we have with people like Rick, or with sponsors, physicians, payers, allied healthcare providers, and patients. There are a series of touch points, asynchronous and synchronous, to help companies devise plans, strategize, come up with tactics, how to come up with their own interesting patient support programs, et cetera. So check out impetusdigital.com. We'd really like and appreciate if you can like and subscribe to our channel. Please also leave us some feedback on iTunes. We want to thank everybody for their time today. And thank you as well, Rick, for an outstanding conversation.